to Rise Up on the Porch with me, Lauren. This platform and space is a safe space to talk about anything vulnerability, anything spirituality, really just anything you want it to be, whatever we want it to be. I am here today with Kate McReynolds. She is a mental health counselor and yoga instructor for Roots to Rise Counseling. I said that right?
Root to Rise.
Root to Rise. Root to Rise Counseling. So the first question I typically ask my guests is a little bit about their journeys. And so just overall journey and then how that brought you to be a mental health counselor and yoga instructor.
Yeah. So I always thought counseling would be a cool job. I don't have a very interesting story as to why I wanted to become a counselor, but I always thought it was interesting to figure out how people thought about things, how they solved problems. So I decided to major in psychology when I was in college, and that is when I took abnormal psychology, which is one of the classes where you learn about all of the mental illness diagnoses, and that's what hooked me. I was like, this is so cool, this is so interesting. So I finished that degree and then immediately started my master's at the same school for mental health counseling. And I did a general class track there where I kind of just did a little bit of everything. I learned about family counseling, play therapy with children, couples counseling. I learned a little bit about school and career counseling, but that wasn't necessarily my focus. And when you're in that type of counseling master's program, you are required to do an internship where you go out into the field and you actually work with people and learn how to be a counselor and put your knowledge to practice. So I got an internship, which ultimately led me to my first real counseling job as a therapist, and that was in community mental health. And being in community mental health, when you're billing to insurance companies, they put a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot do with clients. So insurance companies weren't really big at that time on things like yoga and mindfulness. They wanted things that were more kind of based from the medical model as opposed to the wellness model. And so that was always a hiccup for me. I did what I was supposed to do. I ran groups, I did individual counseling, and I loved it, and I still do. But I felt really limited by the medical model, and because my brain has always come from that wellness perspective. And I've always practiced yoga. My sister actually is the one who introduced yoga to me, so I could probably credit her for that. And she's a yoga teacher too. And so always practiced yoga, and then I was actually in a yoga class laying in Shavasana one day, and I opened my eyes and there's a flyer under my mat at the end of class when everyone's leaving, and the teacher had put it there, and it was a flyer to sign up for yoga teacher training. And everything just clicked in that moment. I was like, that's it. That's what I have to do, become a yoga teacher and combine that with mental health. So I, went around town looking for office space. After I became a yoga teacher, I went through that certification. And I went around town looking for anyone, anywhere who would let me use their office after hours to start seeing clients and start my own private practice. And then I stumbled upon where I work now, which is called Apiary Wellness. It's a wellness collective. There's a lot of great practitioners there, all holistic health. There's acupuncture, massage therapy, yoga therapists, counselors, and I was able to create what I wanted to, and it took a couple years, but it's working.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. And I find it interesting how like one thing could lead to another, like I find it really cool that, whether you call it manifest destiny or whether you call it universal destiny, whatever resonates with you, how like your sister introduced you to yoga, and then you started practicing yoga, and then one day somebody puts a flyer under your mat, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like this is like amazing.
It was a literal sign.
Like hello, literal sign.
And what you've been looking for.
I know. Here you go. And I think that's super cool. And I think it's cool, the combination of mental health and yoga, because yoga, most people think it's physical, but it actually has to do with a lot of mental as well.
Yeah. I mean, it can be physical. A lot of it is. And if that's your goal with yoga, then that's fine. It's your yoga, and who's to tell you that it can't be that way, you know? But I think you're right. And what you're saying is that there's a misconception that that's all yoga could be.
Yeah.
Not that that's a small part of it. That's a huge, very impactful part of it. But that makes me think of something we learn in teacher training, which is the 8 limbs of yoga. And asana, which is the physical yoga poses that you would do in a class, in a studio, or that kind of setting. That's only one of the 8 limbs. And so there's 7 other parts of yoga that most people don't know about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I pull from when I bring it into counseling sessions with people. Yes, we do asana practice in our sessions, but we also get help from those other 7 limbs. So.
Yeah, no, I find that really cool. All right, so my next question is how, after, you know, you're being a mental health counselor, being a yoga instructor, so how do you tune in to your inner guidance? Like how, you know, like just like take a moment, because I mean, I feel like that's something that takes some time a lot to hone into a lot, like to know in a certain situation to like sit for a minute in quiet and tune in and be like, okay, what should I do? Or just in general, like for day-to-day stuff.
I laugh at that question only because I'm glad that you asked it, because so many people are like, oh, you're a therapist, you're a counselor, you have all your shit figured out.
It's
I'm like,
no.
I'm human. I have a therapist for myself.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you asked that question, just to kind of break that, I don't know what the word is, but that false perception that therapists are like not equal to their clients.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're human too. We need to take a minute to reset and tap into our inner guidance. So yes, I love that question. So to answer it, something I learned when I was in school was to identify the different hats that I wear in my life. I'm like, what are my different roles? And counselor is only one of them. Yoga teacher is only one of them. I have so many other ones. So anytime I'm going into a session, even if it's a particularly like easy client who has relatively mild issues and nothing too severe that would take a lot of like mental energy on my part, I always, whether it's in my car or when I'm sitting in my office waiting for them to come, I always just take a moment to sit and maybe take a few deep breaths and put my counselor hat on. And that kind of helps me stop thinking about anything that would interfere with my ability to be of service to that person. So if my baby was crying all night long, or if something happened with a loved one, I take a minute and I say, that's not why I'm here right now. It's not about me, it's about them. And that's something I actually learned in yoga teacher training, was it's not about me, it's about you. Yeah. So I usually practice that positive affirmation. Deep breathing is the best prescription for so many things, so that's always helpful. Sometimes I even turn on one of my yoga playlists. I have several of them, and one of them is more restorative, very quiet, meditative instrumentals, and so I'll put that on, and just sometimes listening to that helps me tap into that inner tranquility and space of feeling calm. Because sometimes I can't do it in my head. Like I have my own stuff going on, and so I need something external to help me do it. So
no, I completely understand that.
It really just depends on the day and the situation. I've got a list of things I do that help me. So
when people ask me about like what specific meditation I do and things like that, I'm always like, oh, that's such a big question.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, just like life, like you change and you evolve, and so does your meditation practice.
Yeah.
I mean, like there are a lot of people who just concentrate on one specific meditation, whether that's Vedic, transcendental meditation, Kundalini, you know, but I just like, it ebbs and flows. Like I haven't found that particular one yet. But you know, that's goes hand in hand with what you said with the mini hats and things like that. It's like, there's so much to one person.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And it's hard to like separate that sometimes. So I think that's really, really good advice.
Yeah.
to do. And I also found it interesting when you said to, you know, it's not about me, it's about them. Like taking your ego out of it.
Oh my gosh, it's so hard sometimes.
It's so hard. I just had this conversation with Brendan last night about ego and how that you know, it's really hard and it takes a lot of practice when you're in whether a hard conversation with somebody or an argument or even just like a negative reaction with somebody at a gas station. It's so hard for you to take your ego out of it and just be like, okay, this isn't about me. Like, instead just be like, so why do you feel like you need to yell at me right now? Why do you feel upset?
Yeah.
Instead of being like, you son of a, like, you know, instead, like, that's really hard to do.
You've read the 4 Agreements, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you haven't read the 4 Agreements, there's a chapter in there, and I probably read, and it's a really short book. You could read it in one night in bed. But there's this one chapter in there that I probably reread once every year because I really need to. And it's all about not taking things personally. Not in the sense that you're being like egocentric or being over dramatic about things, but it helps you tap into that thought process of, okay, where is this urge to react coming from? And it helps you understand about your ego and why things that other people do and say don't necessarily have anything to do with you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's something I think with doing my, like, practicing my meditation. I feel like, you know how me and Kate have known each other for a very long time. She's one of my best friends. So, and she knows I'm a very empathetic, sensitive individual, but sitting down and doing yoga and meditation and all those things has really taught me to take the ego out of it sometimes, but
it's
it
a
takes
hard practice.
Oh my gosh, that, like, the ego controls everything. Very hard practice.
You're really good at it though. She's like, she inspires me to meditate. Like, I'm a therapist and I still, like, I'm obviously, like I said, I don't have everything figured out, so she's like, hey, meditated today, and I'm like, I need to do that more. And I tell my clients to do this. I need to practice it too.
It's funny, anybody who's a healer, healer, whether that's a doctor, mental health counselor, energy healer, body worker, somebody who does apothecary work, you know, I mean, most people, yoga instructors, like most people, you know, some maybe do meditations and stuff, but a lot of the times I realized that, especially people who are more like conventional, like mental health counselor, doctors, things like that, they don't take care of themselves as much as they take care of their clients. Yeah. And that's one thing I tell my boss at my work. I'm like, did you breathe today? Did you do this today?
Did you eat breakfast?
Oh, exactly.
Did you shower?
No, I'll walk into her office and I'll be like, here's an avocado with salt and pepper. Like, eat it here. Like, take it. Well, you know, it's interesting.
It is. And my personal and professional opinion on why that happens, and this isn't obviously the answer for everybody, but I think that comes from a place of us having a responsibility to our clients and patients. Not necessarily that we feel responsible for them and what happens to them, but we have a responsibility to be there for them, and we're willing to put our stuff aside to make that happen because we know we can always come back to it later. Yeah. But then we do that over and over again, and we procrastinate, and before you know it, like it's later and we haven't done it yet. So that's why I think that happens sometimes.
I just think it's a important statement to make, is that everybody, if you don't fill your cup up and take care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of other people. And I mean, I do the same thing. So, but I once told somebody, they were telling me how when they talk to somebody who's like in distress or, you know, talking about health stuff, how they visualize them taking bricks off the person's shoulders and they put it on them. And then she's like, well, then I changed that because she was getting burnt out and drained, like energetically drained. She's like, now I just put it on the table, but then I'm just staring at this stack of bricks on the table. I'm like, I told her, I was like, you have to visualize them taking the bricks off their shoulders themselves and putting it in a bag and tossing it over their shoulder.
Ooh, I like that.
Because then it's not, you know, you're helping them along with that energetic stuff, but you're not taking it on yourself. Right. But, you know, practice too.
That's a big part of counseling too. I mean, there's a whole portion of the education in becoming a counselor where you learn about that kind of stuff, so as to not go through vicarious trauma and, you know, counselor, healing worker burnout. So
Yeah. I mean,
it's definitely an important topic.
Of course.
We could, well, maybe we'll talk about that one in a whole other
okay.
porch talk.
So this kind of question goes along kind of with what we're talking about too. What is one thing someone can do to shift their mindset when they're in, like, we kind of discussed that already, but maybe get deeper into that question.
Yeah.
It's that, I like that deep breath. Did you hear Kate? She goes,
I'm tapping into my inner guidance.
Yeah.
So this is actually a really big part of my whole philosophy as a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So I pull from a bunch of different origins of theory when it comes to the counseling techniques that I use with my clients, but most of it is cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive is just a fancy word for thinking. So essentially, CBT says that we can control our feelings and our behaviors if we can start to identify and restructure our cognitions, our thought patterns. So something that I work on with 100% of my clients is identifying a situation where the feeling we have, even if we don't know what the feeling is called, we know that it just feels unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So not really labeling the feeling quite yet, but taking that and then just kind of working backwards, like rewinding. Okay, so what happened before you started feeling this way? And usually it could be like a small event, or it could be something really big and significant. But essentially we say that whatever event happens to you, we have an opinion about it, we have a perception about it, and then that's our thought, that's our cognition. And so that influences how we feel about the situation, and then how we feel about the situation influences how we behave. So that's cognitive behavioral. So if we sat down and you looked at me and I like did this weird face at you, like, that would be like an event that happened to her, right? So you could think a million thoughts about me making that face, and one of them could be, Kate doesn't like me, she doesn't want me here. So if you think that, you're probably going to feel unloved, insignificant, unwelcome, you know, not supported. And when you're feeling all those things, you're probably going to behave in a way that's more isolating or withdrawn or shy or things like that. Maybe you leave, you know, maybe we reschedule this for another day. So if we can start to understand that pattern and then kind of rewind to the initial thought that started it, we can choose to think a bunch of other different thoughts about why I made that face at you. So, oh, does Kate have allergies? Right? Does Kate,
something smells real bad?
Does Kate see something weird over my shoulder? Yeah. So when you think that, it's not like about you and your worth as a person, so you might not feel all those negative emotions, and then you might not behave in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I really think it's helpful and important to start paying attention to that process of your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And I always do this with my clients just to kind of help them remember. I go thoughts, feelings, behaviors. Just kind of like head, shoulders, knees, and toes, but it's like thoughts, feelings, behaviors. But if you can find that initial thought and choose to practice that cognitive restructuring where, okay, I could think this way about it, but what are all the other things that I could also think? And how will that shift the rest of that cycle?
Yeah. I mean, that's like that average human, brain thinks that way.
Yeah.
You know, like, so there's some times where there'll be a situation and it's like I'm creating these like stories in my head about it that are not true or what possibly could be. So I feel like that's so helpful to just like be mindful of your thoughts. And do you think it would like be helpful in situations like that too, to just like ask a question to somebody like, are you okay? Like, am I bothering you?
Oh, absolutely.
Like, why are you making that face? Does something smell? And then I don't know, but also I think like just taking that mentally internally for yourself is very good tips too. Yeah, I like it. I like everything. All right, a fun question. What's your favorite yoga pose?
Cool. Man. Probably pigeon pose.
I like that.
Yeah, for a few different reasons. I like, obviously, all yoga poses can be done in many different variations. But I really like the different variations with pigeon pose in particular, because depending on, you know, how I'm feeling. For example, when I was pregnant, like, I couldn't really lay on my belly in pigeon pose, and so doing it on my back was really helpful, or bringing bolsters underneath me was really helpful. But I really like that one because it's a hip opener, and our hips tend to hold on to things like grief, stress, anger, fear, and so it really releases a lot of that for me. And it's also just one of those very, like,
oh, it's so painful, but it feels so good. I'm like, I've been holding these words behind my mouth while Kate's talking, and I'm like, it's so painful, so good.
It's so good.
It's
What
so
is it?
good.
I don't know.
But it's just like, and I notice every time, like, and most yoga instructors do this. Like, when you're in pigeon pose, they tell you, they're like, okay, like, this is an opportunity for you to let go of your day, let go of your things. And almost like every single time I'm in pigeon pose, and if it's for an extended period of time, I want to cry.
I cry probably 75% of
Every
the time.
time I want to, I'm like,
Well, that's because what I
Holding
talked
it
about,
back.
you're holding on to all that
Yeah.
stuff in your hips, and so when you open it, you open the floodgates for that.
oh my god, it's like,
I just think it's such a, like, universal pose. It's appropriate for literally everything. You can do it in a hot power class, you can do it in yin, you could do it in slow flow, you can do it in a restorative class. So literally, no matter what mood I'm in or what energy level I'm in, I feel like I can do it, and that it will help me in some way.
yeah. And I think you're right too with like the variations. You know, if for some reason that day, pigeon pose, I don't know the technical term for it, where you just fold over your legs. If that's not like viable, accessible that day, you can just lay on your back and do it.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's, I mean,
And bolsters, just
now I want to do pigeon
yeah. Get a yoga bolster.
pose. Yoga bolster.
Yeah. It's almost Christmas.
Oh,
so-
my favorite thing too is when like instructors come to you and like push on your back, and it's like ow, but it feels
don't
so
stop.
good. Don't stop. Keep on pushing. And then they leave, and you're like, where are you going?
Yeah.
Come back. Come back. Okay. All right. So, where do you feel most like yourself? Hard question. This is like, I asked myself, I'm like, oh, where do I feel most like myself? And that can be like, it doesn't have to be like your home. Like, it could be literally anywhere.
So, I have so many answers.
Tell them all. Tell them all.
The first one that popped into my mind was when I'm watching and listening to live music somewhere with my husband and we're dancing. We just talked about this last night, how we love that we do that together. And then
yeah, and you two are just, when you see, like, you know, when I see that happening, you two are just like, it's like this like big light around you too.
Aww.
Like, I can just, like, it's energetic, because it's not just like, it doesn't just affect you two in your field, like it's just you two dancing, but it like, it energizes the whole room, and then like everybody comes and dance, you know, so it's not just like, it's amazing.
we have started quite a few dance parties.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you. That
You're
was very
welcome.
sweet. So definitely that. Also camping, usually when our dog is there, and like when you guys are there. I actually, one of the things that I had spoken to my therapist about a couple months ago was discussing my okay place, just as a coping skill for when I'm really stressed. And it took me a few weeks. I came up with one answer, and I was like, that's not the right answer. And I figured it out, that swaying in a hammock outside, and that usually happens when I'm camping.
Yeah.
But she was telling me, she was like, it doesn't have to be when you're camping. You can do that literally anywhere. So swinging in a hammock, especially in weather like this, I just love that, because it just is relaxing. And I don't know.
It can take like, you can swing in a hammock outside for 5 minutes and feel refreshed. I feel like, and it's nice because you're like looking up at the sky.
Yeah.
Like, I feel that sometimes I realize that like us as human beings tend to like look to the floor a lot, and we tend to like our necks are forward and we're to the ground, whether like looking on our phones or just up, and we don't ever like tilt our head up to like the stars and the moon and the sun. And like with the hammock, you're like laying and you're like watching the trees blowing the wind, and just like it's so beautiful. I love
and I
it
think
so
that
much.
gentle movement can be really grounding
Just like,
too.
It's just nice. That's funny. I told Brendan yesterday, I was like, we need to put up our hammock. Like, can we do it? I miss it so much.
I said that to Jeff yesterday.
It's really funny. Maybe it's a sign. Like, maybe they both can put up hammocks today.
We were driving to a park, and I said, oh, we should have brought a hammock. So, yeah, hammocks are great.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, more questions. More like really in like inner questions that are like kind of hard to think about sometimes. Any advice? This one makes me cry sometimes when I think about it.
Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous.
Like in a really good way.
Okay.
I shouldn't have said that before.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Any advice you would give your 13-year-old self?
Aww.
I'm like about to cry.
All
Like
right.
tears are just like forming right now. I'm like, oh, I feel her.
You feel her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I need to think about this for a second. What was I doing when I was 13? What did I need to hear? Okay, so I kind of touched on this a couple questions ago when I was talking about, I don't know what I was talking about, but not being responsible for people.
Yeah.
I would probably tell my 13-year-old self that I'm not responsible for other people's feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Is that advice?
That's like solid advice.
Yeah.
Because I feel, I mean, when you're a teenager, and I feel I like the question because of your 13-year-old self, because I feel like most women start like really becoming a woman at that time. And I think it's so effing confusing and emotional, and most people at that point have their, like, women have their period, and it's just like you're a child but you're also like becoming a woman. It's just like fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But also like even within relationships, like that building relationships as a young woman, I feel like we as women are more empathetic and caring, and so we tend to like take on other people's feelings and try to like take care of people, because that's like what you're conditioned to do. Like you see your mother do it, you see other women around you do it, and I think that's valid. Like, you know.
And while that's a great, trait to have just as a human in general,
yeah,
not necessarily just a woman, but yes, take care of people, but
don't let
be mindful of if you are like not taking care of yourself in order to do that.
Exactly.
So, you know, if you think someone's feeling upset about you canceling plans, like, they could be, but that's not your fault.
Yeah.
That's them, you know, that's how they choose to think about it. They're in control of their feelings and their behaviors, and that's not on us.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I like that. That takes a lot of practice too.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I always used to think like,
I wouldn't have a job if that was easy.
I know. Like I still do it to this day. I'm like, oh, why is that person's upset? Like,
yeah, me too.
But also I'm like, it's not my problem in the end. I mean, it's okay to care about somebody, but it's also, you need to protect your
care about
energetic
others.
field.
Exactly. So care about others. Don't stop caring about yourself in the process.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. Okay. So I heard this on another podcast and I really liked it. Lewis Howe's podcast. So I wanted to kind of introduce that here too. It was, what are 3 things you would like to leave behind? 3 truths, like not materialistic, but like 3 truths to the world that you know to be true.
How much time do we have?
Oh, we have a lot of time. This does not have to end whenever.
Oh my goodness. Not prepared for this, Lauren. All right.
I did this one on purpose. Unprepared.
You are not responsible for others. I mean, we already talked about that. Definitely think that that's true. You are capable of more than you think. Like you're stronger than you think.
Yeah.
One more. I honestly believe that things will always find a way to work out. Whether it's you putting hard work in, other people helping you out, the universe being crazy and ironic and like doing things for you. I don't know what it is, but I have this faith that for most people, regardless of things that have happened to them or trauma that they may have experienced, that they will be okay.
Yeah, I totally believe that too. And that's something that I feel like you've always been that way too. You know, you've always had that like, okay, everything will work out the way it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of times too, especially for those individuals who realize that and they do the work too, because I think sometimes it's like if you just stay stagnant and not better yourself, then maybe it's going to be a slower process to that. But then also if you recognize that and actually do work to make yourself a better human,
right.
And I find too, if you try to make yourself a better human and then also try to expand that circle to like do that for other people or help them out or be more generous, like that kind of spreads that too.
Yeah, and it builds that resiliency too. And I think especially reaching out to people to get help for yourself and also being there to support other people is so important, because something that I always talk about is how like we don't need other people to solve our problems for us or to make things work out for us, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to do it alone still. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, because it is hard when you're like in a spot or like going through your own thing to reach out and be like, hey, like I really need somebody to talk to right now. Yeah. But I totally agree. I think everything will work out the way it's supposed to, and y'all, the universe is wild, and whether you think you're going through some shit or not, it's always for a reason. I call like any time that like shit hits the fan or you're in a dark place or whatever, like a growing pain. Because I actually made this analogy to a close friend of mine the other day. We were like texting back and forth because she's doing a lot of inner work. And you know, when you're doing a lot of inner work, you tend to like go through dark times because you're doing a lot of shit and you're bringing up a lot of shit. And I said, sometimes I feel like I'm a rock and I'm just constantly throwing it on the ground, like constantly and then eventually it's gonna break and there's gonna be crystals inside.
Ooh.
So I feel like that's like life.
Yeah.
You know, like you're constantly working so hard to make yourself better, and eventually it will crack and in the inside will be fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
So.
I learned something at a trauma training that talked about how our wounds and the cracks that we have that open us is what lets our light shine out and creates that healing process.
I love it all. Yeah. I just like bathing in this like conversation. I love it. All right. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I love you.
Aww.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes. So my private practice is called Root to Rise Counseling. My office is in Orlando at Apiary Wellness. And all of my information is on my website. It's rtrcounseling.com. So you can find information about the different therapeutic and yoga services that I offer there, workshops, groups, individual sessions. My phone number, email is all on there. My social media is there. So feel free to reach out.
Yay.
I'll be waiting.
All right, everyone. Well, we're done here, and thank you for listening. And if you have any questions or anything, you can write me or email me and connect with Kate. I hope everybody has a beautiful day and rise up, live bright.
Bye.